Okay, I mean, you have no questions. I just had a few things I want to keep going here because of my unorganized, I don't know what you want to call it after 40 years of this stuff. But anyway, I can't time it right. In fact, last night, kind of going through it, because I said I got to shorten it. So I took a bunch of slides out, moved them down. And then the white Rita was in the other room and I swore. And he said, what happened? I said, I lost half of it. So then I was scrambling. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But the diamondback, these are the insects. Anitha talked about it, the flea beetle and leaf hoppers. We aren't going to spend any time, lygus bugs. There's a lot of issues. I think grasshoppers will be a problem this next year. But the diamondback moth, I just want to review a few things, what we've seen the last few years. I get this before I do. This is the canola, like we talked about for flea beetle, like Anitha, the over the top. This is a slide from a few years ago where the farmer had, because back in the day when flea beetles were an issue, we'd say, well, at least let's get a border spray, make a pass around, right? That's what the heavy pressure is. So he did that. Then he came back 2 weeks later to do his post herbicide. Here's the pass where he made, and here's out in the field where he didn't. Should have sprayed the whole darn field. And I think that's the thing with this flea beetle and Anitha stuff. This post-emergence, it's taken the time to do it. It's not that expensive, but if there's any sign of the flea beetle, I think we just have to hit it. Anitha talked about the Roseau County and that plot there, which did the same research, but they kind of blew it. On Friday, they were going to spray for flea beetles over the top. Said, well, they weren't that bad. Came back Monday and the plot was basically gone. So there's no time delay here and say, well, maybe tomorrow or the next day. If it's hot out, sunny, if you see them and they're feeding heavily, just spray or have somebody get out there and do it. So that's kind of lesson on this picture. Blackbirds are our best scout. I know we got Mark Husso. The scouts do a great job, but blackbirds, if you see them out there, they're looking for something. The diamondback moth, am I wasting my time? Are you guys listening? I think yeah. Anyway, there's a problem. I'll get to a few. The areas where we see the biggest problem with diamondback moth are where it's dry. You haven't had any rain, let's say in July and early August, because it's an insect that'll get washed off and it'll get slowed down with heavy rain, or even just a ½ inch of hard rain, it'll slow it down. In the years where you don't get that, July through first week of August, they've multiplied out there and they're just huge numbers. And you can see just the fading of the field here. That's diamondback moth. And here's a little critter. He's small, obviously hard to see. Here's where they and when you're smaller and you start flowering, they're just kind of tucked up in the leaves, and they're really hard to find unless you grab the plant and bang them on the hood of your pickup. Then they're squiggling all over. This is a key, I think, that we're kind of missing. First of all, did I say it? Diamondback moth, they don't survive here. Great news. They have to fly up from the south. Unless a nice winter like this, who knows, Anitha, maybe some will, but they have to move in. So they move in early, and this is the picture of the adult. But anyway, the moth, so obviously she'll lay eggs. The eggs are there, and then hatch into the larva. That's what causes the problem here. And then they pupate, the little cocoons. So that's why in these fields, you see a little of everything, because these moths are coming in at different times. So you'll see eggs, you'll see larvae, you'll see cocoons, and they just keep cycling. And that's what we have to look for that. So this is a couple plants from the field. You can see these cocoons here, 6 on this one here. They're packed together, a couple here. Now, the economic threshold, guys, is 10 to 15 per plant per square foot. I mean, we're at like 20 times the economic threshold on this example, because we got hundreds of pods in that square foot. So it's key is to look and find. And when you see this, and you see a lot of this, obviously it doesn't do any good to spray because there's no larva there, but you got to look in, and maybe the larvae are still back there on some of the greener plants. So here's a field in 2019 up kind of the Ossenbrock area, just bleached out there. You can see it's a low spot. So you say, well, it's kind of dry, but that isn't. And that was all diamondback moth, just loaded. And 21, same thing. This is west of Langdon on August 18th. I saw this field, and it was a really dry area, kind of by Dresden, and just white. It was actually a full section and just all bleached out in diamondback moth. I went in there, and here you can't really zoom in, but this full of the pupae or cocoons on there, plus larvae. And so it just decimated it. And all I'm going to say about that is in defense, I had a call from some guys by Hamden, same area. And we talked earlier about this amount of rain. So let's say in end of July, we're sitting at 2.5, 3 inches of water. Thinking of 88, well, shoot, guys, I mean, crop insurance is 27 cents. Should I go spend the money out there because I'm already in crop insurance? And so a lot of guys just chose not to spray. But lo and behold, where they did spray, there was a huge difference. But so it's just kind of one of them things. And I even said, well, yeah. And here I showed you that data in the soil of how well the crop did, even on that little bit of moisture. Aster yellows. This is the one that Mark, I mean, some of you guys remember, if you're around, they said to be in 2007, 2012, Aster yellows. Yeah. We haven't seen it since, but I don't even know what's on my next slide. This is what it is. You won't even see it. It's so small, but it's a little leaf hopper. And in 2007 and 2012, they were really bad. They came in early. And the most frustrating thing with that disease is it's really not. It's a phytoplasma that this leaf hopper injects into the plant when it feeds on it. And actually only the leaf hoppers, only probably 5% of them are actually infected with that. So just totally unknown, but I'll show you a reason to go back to spraying the canola. And again, we couldn't evaluate it, but for flea beetles early, because that's when you have to control this. So maybe this spring, 2007 and 12, if you remember, very dry spring, a lot of southerly winds. And these just came up like the diamondback moth, but these came in and started to feed on them, little cotyledons. You didn't even notice the feeding, and then all of a sudden you had issues where the pod, can I come back up here? Where the pod just turns into a little bladder. Just beautiful green plants, and just decimated. Not a single viable seed on the plants, and this was all over. I have some better slides, but what happened is, and this is, I had some calls this last spring that Ron heard him at the Roundup talking about spraying for Aster yellow, spraying early. And this is where the data came from. And the problem is we didn't get a good rating, but Scott Hawley, our pathologist there, put in this study here for blackleg. It was talking about this morning, blackleg. How do we combat it? So they're thinking, well, fungicides. Let's start fungiciding and try control blackleg. So you had all these different, cotyledon, 2-leaf, 4-leaf, all the headline, quadrus, and then all of a sudden, and you see the yields then. Here's one by Bifenthrum tundra. Nothing different, not sprayed a cotyledon because we hadn't talked about it yet after we talked about the leaf hoppers. And he said, well, I'll throw it in this empty trial. 2,800 pound at 2-leaf. So that's when we're going after them flea beetles. So the flea beetles aren't bad. If leaf hoppers are talked about, we don't spray just to spray, but this could be huge. 4-leaf, it was actually a little bit late. They only got, well, it's still that next highest yielder. But so 2-leaf cotyledon. So keep that in mind on the flea beetles that I may be able to control this leaf hopper. There's some fields. And how many of you guys remember that? I think I'll tell the story of guys that actually, and this is so ironic, because Cavalier County, canola capital of the world, you could say almost, but that have grew canola and quit growing it in 13 because of what they saw there. No control. We didn't have a clue. Nobody talked about it. And even I said spray early. That's not science or data. They don't recommend anything for it, but it's a way that you can possibly intercept them. But field after field like that, 600, 700, 800 pound, and they quit growing canola in 13, and because of that, it hit them so doggone hard. So that's what I'm kind of scared of. It's been like 12 years now, but keep that in the back of your mind. Diseases, we didn't spend anything. Sclerotinia, we all know, clubroot, we're kind of getting that under control. Blackleg, verticillium stripe, they talked about this morning. It came in 14. I talked about the Aster yellows. Will it be here in 24? Will they? Just keep a heads up for that. Your consultants will be watching for leaf hoppers, which again would mean they're spreading it. Verticillium stripe, not a big, it's a rotation thing. And I think the consultants earlier today talked it right. You just got to spread that rotation. Yeah, in Cavalier County, the best thing they did years ago was every other year canola, because what happened? They built their bases. They got this huge canola base, and then the PLC payments were so high for 8 years there, it just paid reward or dividends. But now we're in a situation that we have to spread that rotation. Verticillium stripe, it'll lodge on you, but it's a late lodge. So that usually the pod where blackleg, it can girdle the stem and everything, but with verticillium stripe, it lodges, and so it's a lodging issue, but the pods are basically filled. But it spreads on the closer rotation and wet years. And this last year we had some lodging, but Anyway, so verticillium stripe. Other than that, the diseases, unless you guys have questions, that's kind of why I wanted to get through this about any of the diseases. We can talk about straight cutting, but I guess we don't have to. Got any storage? They used to say always sell it or you'll smell it. So just don't hang on to it too long and roll it. If you got to haul out a few loads, just roll her into another bin because it's nasty once we have issues. Okay, I got more, but that's all we'll do on that. Any questions on that or for Anitha on the flea beetles or? Here, or I guess you probably don't. Well, I didn't even need that though.
Any of you notice any differences in the varieties in flea beetle injury? Did any of you? Do you use different varieties or just one? Just one? Because I had a couple of farmers who told me that they used the same seed treatment on two different varieties, and one is pristine and the other one is like being beaten. So, and I did visit those fields and it was true. Very, very true. So I was like very surprised if there is any varietal differences in flea beetles. And this is not like it's nobody has ever reported this thing. So it's something we are going to look this year. We'll definitely look at that and see if it is variety that is causing that there is some resistance or it is just some chemical cues that is repelling the flea beetles. Something we'll find out this year. I'm just curious if anybody else noticed that. I think I can't say. But it's a Liberty Link variety, so we'll definitely look at it this year, and I'll tell you next year. All right, any questions? Sure.
Ron, how do you best suggest to scout for Diamondback on? It's a challenge.
Oh,
it's I guess my biggest concern is you can check a hot spot on one side of the field,
absolutely.
go to the other side, and there's nothing.
Yep.
And to try to get good samples from various spots in the field that time of year is not practical.
It isn't. It's practical. I mean, it's almost humanly impossible because you can't walk through the heavy stand unless you got your sprayer tracks. But no, I just watch the forecast. Like I said, if we've had a week or two of no rain, and then we'll start checking those spots and look for the slightest color change and try to check them spots out. And usually it'll be what I've seen on maybe some of those little gray eroded knolls. They're on a dry year are kind of suffering anyway from moisture. It seems like the moth like to land in there first. So kind of check them spots in the headland, and that's about all you can do. And it's a tough one. And like I said, you walk in there, like I said, you got to bang that plant. You just can't. Well, if you look close, you can find it, but otherwise, I sympathize that there's not a good way that I can see. Unless Mark, you got a miracle way to do it? Yeah, swim through it. Yeah, good point. Follow that deer that ran through there or something. Yeah. But no, it's a challenge. I sympathize with all the scouts on any of these canola insect issues scouting, because how do you get through there? Like I say, I hope they sprayed late with their and walk through the tram lines or the tracks. So
I would say like scouting is a difficult thing, especially the larvae. However, if you want, you can track it from the adult stage. You can put out some pheromone traps and check for the adults.
you guys hear it? Yeah.
And then if you see high numbers, then you can start looking for the larvae.
Yep.
You seed early, you have flea beetle problems.
Mhm.
You seed later, you have the Diamondback.
Yep. It could go both ways. The Diamondback moth.
Diamondback moth is not a sure thing that will happen every year because it is a migrating insect. This is because it doesn't overwinter in North Dakota. It has to come from south or somewhere else. So it depends on when you're getting the, so when do they come up is like whenever you have those huge thunderstorms, that's when these moths get into these jet streams and travel that long distances. So that's why you don't see a back moth issue every year. And also it depends on when they land in your field. Some years they come very early so that they can go through their first generation, build up the populations for the second generation, and can cause massive damage. So it's like this year,
It's not necessarily.
it is not necessarily a planting time. You cannot make a change in the planting time and avoid that insect.
Anyone uses
Would
sweat,
you-
they may think.
would you tell somebody who's not direct harvested canola before they're gonna try it next fall?
Do it.
I'm sorry, I did not.
Again.
Direct harvest.
Direct harvest, okay.
That you haven't tried, just do it. I have a bunch of slides like this on the different harvesters. And I tell you, most guys that have done the straight cutting, really hesitant, you just, I don't know, and then once they do it, oh man, I don't know why I ever swapped. So there's a few hiccups there, but no, it's just a nice way to do it.
Have a plan. And when it comes down to it for
Yeah.
dry down
Yeah.
and desiccating, you know, if you're gonna have time, you know, you can go with the glyphosates, but if you wanna get on it quick, I mean, it's gonna take time to dry down to get to harvest.
Yeah,
So,
and a good point, and what we can't forget, and I know I step on toes when I say this. There are enough of people that don't desiccate at all. You talk to them guys out west, the one I just won't mention his name, but 5,000 acres of canola, never desiccates. Just lets it naturally ripen. You can have that real green stubble in places, but some just do that, because the problem with desiccation, I mean, it goes through the combine so much better. I mean, you're gonna be glad you did, so most will agree to desiccate. But it's if you get bad weather later, just like when we kill our wheat, get a long stretch of wet weather, then it'll start breaking down because it was killed. So like these that naturally ripen, they'll just stand better. And I know some with some of these varieties, they aren't really straight cutting some of these high oleic ones, but and I kind of plan, but have a backup swather. So if that stand is not good and knit, like some of them I showed how it's good and tight, even if it's not a pod shire, they'll stay together. But if it's thin, you got these knolls, you probably want to consider swathing it just to even it up. And one thing about the flea beetle, I heard the guys talk yesterday too, or earlier today, those fall flea beetles are nasty when they emerge again. For the adults that don't survive the winter, but they have come in handy on these variable stands where that's so many late green plants, and they'll home in on their green plants and basically they'll desiccate it within 2-3 weeks or within 2-3 days of sunshine. So they can help you, because them plants aren't adding much yield. You just want to get them dried down. So any other yeah, you guys have straight cut. Any other comments on what are you thinking of it? And I'm gonna say one thing, we have a guy that, anyway, I won't know, they'll figure out who it is. Anyway, you don't need the fancy draper header cross arms. You don't need it. It's probably perfect, but if you're sitting there investing another 100,000 in some header, do I really need it? Depending on the acres, that type of thing. But the old rigid head has done the job. Your flex heads are better. You got a little deeper pan under a so-called platform, so you'll get more falling, but you can do it with any combine. Anybody disagree with that? I know there's ideals, and that's why you can't always have the ideal situation when it's gonna cost you a lot of money. So just trying it.
If you do have a draper header that you want to be on.
What's that?
If you are using a draper header, then you want it to on your own.
Yeah,
If it's too heavy of a crop, it'll just
sit,
it won't feed it.
right. And then this is one, you guys all know what that is. I showed this a few years ago, stripper header. Seen them. In Langdon, I should have a date on it. Probably it's 8-9 years ago. I was going through there. Saw these combines just zoom up and down the field of canola, and it was a good stand. And so I had to get over there and looking at a stripper header. Well, they're just taking the pods, and man, could they make time? Probably 8 miles an hour and 3,000-pound canola. So they can work, but you know, it's kind of. I got some other pictures that show the stems up, but you got obviously stubble this high after, but. They can work, so any header can work, or you can make them work. This obviously wouldn't work in a lodge canola at all, like the picture showed. Any other comments? Any other input? You guys will take your input as well. Yep.
It's always recommended seed early. It
Mhm.
seems like later now, the later season. Felt better.
Absolute good point. And yeah. And they still, even here in Canada around the seed early, and I think the guys west more, because you want to beat the heat was in theory of it, beat that, the heat, summer heat. So get it flowering before the late July heat. But yeah, all the data Langdon and Brian had from the planning rates or date studies, yeah, later the better. So if I was gonna pick an ideal time, it'd probably be that June 1st to June 10th. Long term in this region. But again, we'll have to see what your moisture is doing, but no, a good point. So yeah, seeding early isn't necessarily the answer. And then the flea beetles, they tend to be really tough on that early stuff, where the later, I know the plant grows faster, takes in the seed treatment better, they get up in 4 or 5 days like I showed, and they seem like they can stay ahead of the flea beetles. But good point. It's changed.
Yes, I think when I started in 2013, that was the message that, we started giving was, until then, early seeded canola, yes, it takes advantage of the cold and it 3,000 pounds, that's like, right? But slowly when the flea beetle got nasty, the problem became huge. Then we started saying like, go for a little later planting, because the first one who plants the canola gets the highest flea beetles. Because they are hungry and they're waiting for something, the food, and the first one that germinates, they'll attack them. And they can smell them. They can smell them and they can fly.
And being around flea beetle, I know they talked about it. We don't have any economic thresholds for those, what we call the late summer adults that come back out. And what the flea beetle's doing is it's feeding in the spring. After it's done feeding, it lays eggs. The larva works down, they feed in the root system, and then they come up as adults after they pupate. But anyway, there's no economic threshold, but like I think some of you guys mentioned, the consultants in that field, them plants are just black and they're pitting it. It's taken a lot of yield. If it's a large part of the field, you just better spray sooner than later. Don't give it any chance, because they're hungry. It's warm weather, usually end of July, 1st of August when they come out, and they're feeding vigorously.
As a matter of fact, this was the first year I recommended spraying late fall canola for flea beetles. I visited one field that was covered with flea beetles. And if you have a part that is not mature yet, they can cause damage. And I said, like, I recommended just a border spraying because they were so heavy. And I've never noticed that uniformly distributed flea beetles at that pressure. Usually they come in and they choose the spots and they cover the plants in those spots. But this was like uniformly distributed, like way into the field. The beetles, like, they were covered, plants were covered.
Would you say that has any effect for the next crop after that then?
See, that is, his question is like, if you see that much high pressure in the August, can you forecast the same thing happening for the next spring? That's where something we need to understand is, yes, if everything goes fine, yes, last year fall populations would forecast higher populations in the next spring. However, how this winter goes makes a lot of difference, because these adults are overwintering or they are hiding in places where they have to go through these harsh conditions. If they have a nice snow cover, they can sustain even the worst conditions. And you never know, this winter so far it's been so warm, unusually warm. There is no snow cover. And that will affect the overwintering flea beetles. It might take a toll on them. I cannot say that it will. However, the most worst thing that can happen for flea beetles that will affect their populations is spring temperatures. That's when they come out of their dormancy and they have no protection of dormancy. But if the temperatures go down, or like if there's like heavy rains, or like, that's when they're more susceptible to weather conditions. And if those events happen, that will take a toll on the numbers. Otherwise, nice winter, they're well protected. They're adapted to this climate. So they will survive. We think like when the temperatures go like -40 and that's like, oh my God, like, there should be a heavy kill on the flea beetles and we won't see them next year. No, they know where to hide and they're well protected. Ron was saying like Canadians gave us canola. Yes, they gave us canola. They also gave us flea beetles and clubroot and all the.
Anything else?
Is there a general rule with a nice mild winter? Is there a general rule that there will be more insects? We have to depend on that migration would be a big problem.
For migrating insects,
South wind, yeah.
with the south winds, mild winter or severe winter, we won't make any difference for them here because they are not here right now. Yeah, they are spending the winter in the southern states. And they only come up here during summer. So that the only insects that get affected are the ones that overwinter here. So the flea beetles and bird armyworm, all these, they are here. So any difference in the winter or any severe weather situations, that will affect them. A soybean aphid, this diamondback moth, these come up from the south. Weather conditions in the south might affect them. Yeah. Any questions? How many have issues with verticillium stripe? Did anybody notice them in their fields?
Trying to find some pictures of it, but then.
Yeah, this is a kind of, it's not a new disease, but we haven't talked about it in North Dakota before. But our plant pathologist in Langdon Research Center, he's working on this and he's surveying. And for the past 2 years, he got many calls from the growers asking to visit their fields and look, because this is a very tough disease to identify. Usually when lodging happens, we think of it's a white mold or something else happened, but this is it needs a trained eye or a trained pathologist to confirm this disease. So if you happen to notice any lodging and if you don't know why it happened, please call the research center and you can call him and ask him to check out those fields because it is spreading. That disease is kind of taking over. And about the aster yellows, I visited a field and I saw a few of them, not a huge infestation, but a few plants that got affected with aster yellows. This is another tricky insect, like, you never know when they will come, and not just because they are here doesn't mean that there will be a disease. They have to be infected with the disease to transfer. Basically they are the vectors. So they have to acquire the disease from a different plant. And when they feed on a canola plant, that's when they transfer the disease. So it's very unpredictable. Any more questions? We have lots of time.
Talk about facing it all. I was here a little late.
Yeah, I kind of did. Yeah. The row spacing was a question and we had a panel last year up at Langdon, or 2 years ago field day, and there's been successful guys at the 7.5 inch, the 15 inch and 22. Supposedly there's some 30 inchers down south. So they can work in a whole, or they will all work. So depending on if you need a new planter, then you got to decide, well, should I go to 15 or 22? But the conventional, to say no-till drill, they'll work good. And I know there's seed guys, but again, I think the biggest problem we run into with canola though again, for your seed treatments and that, and the more plants you have out there, the more for the flea beetles to feed on. But I think we just have to have a mindset of don't ever overseed. I mean, the lodging issues I've seen for just seeding too much, or I think back, and that's what I could have mentioned for you young guys, and when I started, it was 79, but the 80, 81 too, like they quit growing. But anyway, we seeded everything with the conventional press drill. And you took, the seed wasn't expensive then, but you shut that drill down as far as you could, and you probably ended up getting 10 pounds on with some of the wore out drills. And then we had Tall, that Hudson, and just lodging and crusher, and it just was a mess. And so, but then we got the air seeders now that really help. With air seeders, we can get that seeding rate in the, shoot for that 350 to 450,000, 50,000 plants. Anybody else have any opinion what they're doing, if you like it or not? Go ahead.
Have you done any work with foliar micros, specifically boron and flowering?
I haven't done any work, and I know there's Moxon B and several products that are being used. It's supposed to help during flowering, but generally in North Dakota, we haven't, the little bit of work that's done, and there isn't a lot, we just haven't seen any good response. So it is, boron is an important nutrient for flowering, but we just haven't, we don't have any trials to show your data. And I think, I guess the tongue-in-cheek thing I can say now too is, no matter what we're trying, a good question makes me think of it. When you get it, you're like 22, remember this, I mean, we planted or late and just ended up with a big crop, 23, no matter what you did, 3 inches of water, 4, nice crop, above average wheat yields, the best on some farms. It's the best wheat I ever saw comment on my brother's farm south of Langdon, straight cutting at less than 2 mile an hour, 90 bushel wheat, and just picture perfect. But anyway, point is, if you're trying a new product, and if you just did in 23 and say, holy cow, did that give me yield? Keep in mind what everybody else did, and then consider on that one sulfur, I was going to say, power strips, just try, get passes down the field. The better is 2 passes and kind of get it somewhat replicated and compare these new products, because we're kind of just field to field comparison just doesn't work. And so keep that in mind. You get these good years and you can stand on your head and be the poorest farmer and you'll get a nice crop. So keep that in mind. Test everything, any new stuff. There's a lot of flowing around. The farm economy's been, I have to admit, the last 2-3 years better, but lots of things are being sold and pushed out there, and they may work, but make some comparisons. Take the time. Mostly you have yield monitors in your combine, and man, those strips you leave, test strips, you'll be able to map it out and just see if they really made a difference. And then if it worked 1 year, do the same thing 2 years, because that 1 year you can have the fluke, and we want consistency. And that's why I pride NDSU on what they do in the University of Minnesota. When it's replicated trials, you're going to have some data. When it's only testimonials, you got to be quite careful. Not saying they aren't going to all work, but it's just a thing to keep in mind. Any comments on that or disagreements? But anyway, I was going to say on the nitrogen too, and even on your, well, I work for CHS obviously, and we're spreading all the time, but just leave a power strip or have them shut it off, or put a double rate on somewhere in the field. And then you'll know if we have concerns of nitrogen, is it really that? You'll have a power strip. Yeah, it might lodge, but at least you have something to compare it to. Just trying to guess, get tissue testing, yeah, that'll tell you something, but it's a time factor. So just leave some power strips out there and replicate things if you can. Not always possible, and I hear guys time and time again, well, they tried a new product. Yeah, I left the strip. Well, then after combine, well, we're in a hurry combining and it was going to rain and we just went through, we didn't get our yield checked. But with, like I say, these combines with yield monitors, we can, and if they're calibrated, we can get very close, and that'll help you make the decision, because there's a lot of $50,000 to $100,000 bills sent on trying some fertilizer or some new products. Keep that in mind. Anything else? Say too much there. Step on toes. Yeah. What do you think? Should we wrap it up?
So I just got a quick question here. On my perspective, in Pierce County rugby, it's mostly Liberty Link canola. I guess it's been the way that it's been for quite a while. I just wanted to see a hand, because I don't make it all the way over this way too often. So
raise your hand if you're mostly Liberty Link, sell Liberty Link, or grow Liberty Link canola. All right, there goes most of the poll. All right, there we go. Roundup Ready. Anybody Roundup Ready? Combination Roundup Ready and Liberty Link. Okay, and any other ones? Anybody doing the high oleic stuff? Okay. All right, that answers my question there. So anybody having any herbicide issues, weed issues, anything like that growing with canola? Well, that's great. All right, that's fantastic. And how many years? Oh, go ahead, Jack. Hand it back.
What are your thoughts on fall and soybean?
Falling soybeans.
Oh,
In my opinion, I think it's playing with fire. You know, disease wise is the biggest thing, would be my biggest side of it. You can get away with it, I suppose. I've seen canola get established really nice in soybean stubble. It gets good soil contact, I think, is a big thing there. But I'd say it's the disease side of things more than anything that we're going to be watching out for on the white mold side. I can pass it over to these two for their opinions on it.
I think I thought about that white mold when that's the only concern I have, but weed side, that's not my expertise.
That sums up fair. Whatever you do on your rotations, we need crop, make sure you check with your crop insurance agent, what is okay, what is not, and that type of thing. But we need, I think the consultants mentioned up there too earlier today that we just need that 3-year rotation if possible. So if you're wheat and canola, try get soybeans, something in there, or corn, because this verticillium stripe, blackleg, and all those are basically every other year is just a disaster potential. Because we've seen guys that kind of nowadays we all want to farm in a full corridor. So you see guys, well, I'm going to see the whole field of this, but this is only a 1-year rotation. This is 2 and 500. I heard 1,000-pound differences from one every other year rotation to 1 extra year getting it. So we're trying to get all the field the same, but it's significant. It's huge. If at all you can use the 3-year rotation or 2 crops in between canola, literally, if at all possible. Unless this market just takes off and this whole climate thing and renewable fuels just explode. But again, I don't know how we're gonna make that pay, if the government steps out of it. Okay. We'll be around for visiting later. You can call me anytime with my contacts, and some of you that get my, I do an ag update once a week, usually in the summer. If you want to get on that list, you sure can. It's just a page long. But anyway, just a few reminders I have in there. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.